During his October rally in Queens, the biggest rally of any candidate in the race to date, Bernie Sanders memorably asked the crowd, "Are you willing to fight for someone else as much as you're willing to fight for yourself?" That call to solidarity has resonated broadly, perhaps because many of us seem to intrinsically understand that without solidarity, the diffuse interests of diverse groups of Americans have limited political leverage. In other words, we are much stronger when we stand together. Not me, us. Perhaps nowhere is the need for solidarity greater than in the context of immigration. Non-citizens are already vulnerable, with limited rights under the law. And for decades, the notion of scarcity has been used to discourage the spirit of hospitality that Lady Liberty's famous inscription claims to represent. To be clear, anti-immigrant fear-mongering should never be accepted, ever. But the sad reality is, it becomes more persuasive to lots of voters when half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Life expectancy has gone down for the first time in American history, and mine is the first generation expected to do worse than our parents. As a result, politicians often lean into the idea of a conflict of interest between low-income Americans and immigrants, promising to protect one group at the expense of the other.
We must protect our borders from the ravages of other countries, making our products, stealing our companies, and destroying our jobs.
They took our jobs!
In a valiant effort to criticize nativist, racist sentiments, some Democrats have even understated the economic anxieties faced by Americans of all colors.
This is not, in fact, about economic anxiety. There are plenty of problems with the economy, but that's not what's behind.
What is it about then? What is behind
race.
it?
This is a mistake. The best way to cut anti-immigrant sentiment off at the pass, I'd argue, is to address scarcity at home. Make sure that all Americans are guaranteed a job through a Green New Deal's job program. Guarantee we all have free, comprehensive health care, regardless of employment status. When losing a job can mean life or death for you or your family, you become more vulnerable to claims that immigrants present a unique threat. But when immigrants are included as part of labor advocacy, when they have basic rights in the workplace, they become allies rather than an alternative workforce to be exploited by employers. This is the ethos behind Bernie Sanders' immigration policy. It centers labor rights for all and healthcare for all, making the case that right-wing austerity arguments, which are sold as coming at the expense of unworthy minorities, actually hurt everyone. It's a policy that is honest about how American interventionism has driven millions of immigrants from their homes, and that our contributions to global warming continue to create millions of climate refugees. It's a plan that's as intersectional as it is humane, and importantly, it's one that was drafted with the input of immigrant staff members here at HQ, including our Latino Press Secretary, Belén Sisa, who is herself a DACA recipient. Earlier this month, while I was on the road, Belén sat down with Kal Penn, actor, comedian, and former associate director in the White House Office of Public Engagement for President Obama, to talk about immigration. On this week's Hear the Bern, the two discuss Bernie's immigration policy as well as Penn's new NBC show, Sunnyside, in which he plays a former New York City councilman who ends up helping immigrants in search of the American dream. It's a great chat, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. After that interview, stick around, because I had the immense pleasure of a quick tete-a-tete with members of the U.S. Youth Climate Strike, co-founded by Isra Hersey, daughter of Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar. I was only able to grab them for a quick moment after filming their endorsement videos last week at HQ, but in that short span of time, I feel like I inherited the wisdom of their entire generation. They explained ASMR, TikTok, and the root of Bernie's appeal among the youths. And most importantly, they promised to come back and record a full episode with us soon, complete with hot pickles for some experimental political ASMR. If that last sentence sounded like gibberish to you, don't worry, the kids will explain. Stay tuned for a great episode.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Hear the Bern. My name is Belén Sisa. I'm the Latino Press Secretary for Bernie 2020, and I am sitting in today for our incredible National Press Secretary, Brianna Joy Gray, who's on the campaign trail right now. But I am so happy to be joined by actor and comedian Kal Penn. He's been in many movies and many TV shows, among them Harold and Kumar, Designated Survivor, which I'm a fan of, actually.
Thank you.
And most recently is starring in the show Sunnyside. So welcome, Kal.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're super excited to talk about Sunnyside and, the impact that the show is having, in a time where, politics is getting dangerous for many people.
What do you mean? Everything is fine. Everything is fine. There's nothing to worry about.
The world's not on fire. There are
literally
no floods
on fire.
anywhere.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Sunnyside and why you chose the location for it and how the idea came to be.
Sure. So I co-created the show Sunnyside with my writing partner Matt Murray under the Mike Schur banner. Mike Schur created shows that you probably really know and like, Brooklyn Nine-Nine and The Good Place, and kind of generally very diverse reflections of America that are fast. Like, you can watch episodes 3 times and not understand the joke until the 3rd time because it's so fast-paced. So Matt and I created it under this banner, but the first iteration of it was actually about 5 years ago. I was on another very short-lived show, actually. And when it ended, I was talking to a friend of mine about, well, what's your dream scenario? What would you want to create if you could? And I said, well, the shows that I loved watching as a kid, things like Seinfeld, for example, right? I grew up in New Jersey. That took place in New York City. But it was such a homogenous cast, and it was not the New York that I knew, but still deeply funny. Like, I can't tell you how many Indian uncles I have that remind me of George Costanza. Like, George Costanza is a universal character. So as I was growing up, I was like, oh, that's weird that they would purposely kind of exclude all of these communities that live in that city. But it's a slice of life, and they obviously a very funny show. So when the opportunity to develop something came around, I kind of thought, well, what's the 2019 version of that? What's the version of that is reflective of who we are as Americans? How can you make a patriotic comedic version of what Fresh Prince was to us, or what Seinfeld was, or even what, like, Curb Your Enthusiasm, deeply funny, not particularly diverse, and I think there was a way to do it. So we started talking about what that would look like, and ended up coming up with what Sunnyside is, which is a diverse patriotic comedy that we think is sort of like a big, if done well, we still have 4 or 5 episodes that still have to air, but if done well, sort of a big hug in a way for a lot of folks. Like, we want you to feel like you're hanging out with a bunch of your friends in each episode.
Definitely. I definitely got that from the clips that I got to watch. I was definitely laughing on the first episode. I was like, oh my goodness, this councilman, what is going on?
Yeah, I play a really dumb character, by the way. Like, we're all kind of dumb on the show, but in particular, I play a city councilman who tries to bribe a cop and gets kicked out of office, has no other job skills, and ends up posting it out on Craigslist saying, for $50 an hour, I'll do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And, after a lot of degrading requests, this group of 5 or 6 immigrants ask him to, can we hire you for the day to teach us how to prepare for the citizenship test? And he says yes. They don't know that he knows even less than they do about the process. And that's kind of just the jumpstart of their friendship. The
irony too, right?
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
And speaking of, even in the first episode, I noticed that there's some very serious subjects that are tackled, right? ICE detention, DACA. How is the experience of writing those difficult subjects in, but still making it funny?
Yeah, I kind of used the litmus of things that we learned from making the Harold and Kumar movies. So Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, it came out and it wasn't really a movie that people wanted to see in theaters. And when it came out, we knew that a couple things. One, it was just a funny, dumb stoner comedy, but it was also the first time that you had 2 Asian American men in a studio comedy, period. And when audiences didn't go to theaters to see it, the reaction in Hollywood was, well, see, America's just not ready for 2 men of color highlighting or leading a comedy. And you kind of start to believe that. Then 3 months later, the DVD comes out with no marketing. Fans find it themselves. And now we get to do 3 movies, right? So for Sunnyside, it was a similar thing. Like, what did we learn from that? We learned that, fans know more about what they like than marketing teams do. But B, you can tackle issues that are sometimes really painful and really tough to deal with in a way that is both silly and accessible to people. So, what was that that episode of Hassan Minhaj's show about the Indian elections a couple of months ago? Like, obviously low-hanging fruit, very funny. He's a stand-up comedian, very, very smart guy. But a lot of foreign policy writers were writing about how, it's crazy. Most Americans' only exposure to foreign elections are going to come from that show, from that comedy show, because most of us don't read the New York Times or the Economist every day or every week. And so, very long-winded way of saying we wanted to make sure that the stories that we told were authentic, but also accessible enough if you want to watch it for comedic purposes, which is really our main point in making it.
But you're learning something while you're watching.
You are learning it. Yeah, we also one of the ways to do that was when we were looking to staff the writers' room up, we wanted a diverse writers' room. Hollywood generally, when they and thankfully people are understanding the importance of diversity really in storytelling. Like, the more diverse your writers' room is, the more interesting the stories are going to be. So usually the Hollywood version of diversity is like, look, we have one woman and or one person of color in a junior role in the writers' room. And then the Writers Guild will be like, yep, that's a diverse writers' room. Like, no, that's tokenization. That's totally different. So for us, we wanted to be fully inclusive, and we just cast a wide net and said, obviously you have to be funny first and foremost. And the end result was that our writers' room is made up of everyone is either an immigrant or an immediate family member of an immigrant themselves. All Americans, all extremely funny and smart. And it was a similar thing with our cast. So the reason I bring that up is in terms of how to tell stories about things that are tough, like DACA, or things that are crazy. By the way, we have two characters who are the twins of a billionaire dad whose immigration experience is going to be very different than the DACA recipient. And in order to tell those stories in a funny way, you have to kind of put them all together. And so you've got to have a diverse writer's room that's lived those experiences.
Definitely. That's one of the things that popped out at me, too, is the different immigrant experiences, right? And the stereotype, I feel like, is really broken when you see the group of immigrants that, you were teaching the citizenship test to. That, we all don't look the same. We don't sound the same. We don't have the same cultures or customs. And it seems like in the last few years, the rhetoric has been about just Latinos. Yeah. As if we're the only immigrants that come to this country.
Right. Well, there's also so much scapegoating that goes on, right? When you quantify the immigration experience of one group of people with a particular reason why folks might be doing that. I remember when I did a little over 2 years at the White House, and in the middle I had to take a sabbatical to finish a film that I had started before, the third Harold Kumar movie, actually. And I was friends with this guy, and we filmed it in Detroit, and there was this kid who I met who was undocumented, didn't know it. Your classic story. Russian immigrant, his parents never told him they overstayed their visa. When he's 16 or whatever it was, he went to the DMV to try to get his permit to surprise everybody, and the woman said, you need to leave, you're not supposed to be here, or whatever it was. He goes home and asks his parents, and his parents said, yes, you're undocumented, we didn't want to tell you. So cut to a few years later, he gets detained by ICE, and when he's in detention, the job he had when he got picked up by ICE was he was teaching English to inner city kids in Detroit. Like, what a classic example of this random white dude who didn't know that he was undocumented, who was literally teaching English to other American kids and was in ICE detention. He ended up getting out, and he's he now has a pathway to be able to stay here. But that was, there's a reason that our character Brady, who's the DACA recipient in the episode that actually drops on Hulu today, is because of stories like that,
Yeah. And also the location, right, has a lot to do with Sunnyside. It's actually AOC's district.
It is AOC's district, that's right.
It is one of the most diverse urban areas.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to have it set there?
Because I know Queens enough. I grew up in New Jersey, but we would often go to Queens because back in the day that was the only place that had Indian grocery stores. So you'd pack up the car and take maybe once a month or whatever it was. And I had aunts and uncles who lived there. But Yeah, it's Queens is the most diverse place in the United States, if not the world. There are 200 plus languages spoken in that part of New York City. And it's a reflection on not just the world, but it's really a microcosm of the beautiful folks that coexist in the United States. The rarity of that, right? It's a very patriotic place. It's also New York City, so you're walking down the street and people are ignoring each other. They're like doing everything that New Yorkers do. But if you need something, they're there for you. And it seemed like a really fun place to set a show because you could authentically weave in and out of people's experiences.
And I loved it. I've only gone to New York once, and it was for the Queens rally.
Oh, awesome. Good. Oh, yeah. I missed that. I wanted to go.
Yeah, and, I got to see a little bit of what it was like to be in New York, but I definitely want to go visit now more often. And after seeing this show, I'm like, I want to go experience it myself. So
come to any of the street festivals or parades over the summer.
Okay.
They're pretty great.
You've obviously been in the show business for a while, and you've played several different roles. How do you think that that has evolved, being in different roles and how, things are perceived and how really society kind of, has evolved, I would hope, since then, or maybe not. I don't know. What do you think? How has it changed?
It depends. I think what you see generally the last, 15 years, right? TV has been telling stories that are more and more insightful about just folks' experiences. And it's diverse because audiences are finally demanding that stuff. And it's also content's getting better because things are moving away from network and into streaming. So even something like the Mindy Project, right? 15 years ago, you couldn't fathom that a show like that would be on the air.
Yeah.
Girls on HBO, I mean, similar to the Seinfeld model, it is a relatively homogenous group of people, but what an incredible, funny, biting, female-driven, amazing show that even on HBO 20 years ago, would that have been possible? So, and Lena Dunham's writing and her creativity. So I'm very hopeful. Once things started moving on streaming isn't bound by the same rules as network, as we're learning. We jumped from NBC to Hulu and NBC.com and the app and Roku and all the streaming stuff that people can binge on. And I think that's why you're seeing more of that content, because people are able to access it on their own. You don't have to just sit there at a particular time at night when you're going to be doing other things anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that TV is going to continue to reflect more of our experiences overall. But there's a long way to go for sure.
Yeah.
And
especially with immigration, one of the things that I've noticed, with these streaming services is like Orange is the New Black, for example, right? It talks about mass incarceration. It talks about immigration now in the last season, and ICE detention centers and all of that. So I can definitely see what you mean about, even having more control, right? Of the fans can say, we want to see more of this, or I don't see myself represented, which is important, right? We can't dream something that we don't see.
For sure. And I think sometimes Hollywood gets confused, like I mentioned before, the difference between tokenization and representation. And at least on Sunnyside, we're not interested in tokenization. We're interested in true representation. And you can tell who's interested in that and who's not, right? Orange is the New Black is a great example. It's representative. It tackles issues. It really explores them. And then, there are other shows that maybe every so often there's an immigrant or a person of color or somebody who's not as wealthy as everybody else, and you just get that tiny sliver only every once in a while. But I think we're moving in the right direction overall.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. And I mean, we have people like you, right, who are kind of on the political side of things and in the art world, right? Which I wanted to ask you about because it's so interesting to me. I love Designated Survivor.
Thank you.
So the way that when I found out that you worked for the Obama White House, I was like, oh my God, is he like his character in the show? So what was that like? How did you navigate those both worlds?
To jump from the two. So I worked for, I should probably address that, right? Okay, so for folks who don't know, in 2006, all of the screenwriters in LA went on strike. I was on a show called House at the time. Loved it. I had a great time. My family was finally excited that I was at least playing a doctor if I wasn't going to be one in real life. But all the screenwriters went on strike, so we couldn't film anything. And that was back when, similar to what you see now, it's actually almost exactly 12 years ago, because I joined the Obama campaign I want to say it was October of '07. So there were, 12 different candidates in the Democratic field, and it was a crowded place. And at that time, nobody knew his name. And I think it was only Obama and Ron Paul who weren't taking lobbyist money, which is crazy if you think about it now. Yeah. And people couldn't pronounce his name, the whole thing, right? The whole your standard primary conversation when you have your candidate. And so I went to volunteer for him, and then he started winning states and ended up winning the nomination and then the presidency. So there was an opportunity to work there for about 2.5 years, doing essentially what I had done on the campaign, which is outreach to young people, Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, and the arts community, and loved my 2.5 years, not quite 2.5, just under 2.5 years. Loved it. Then I went back to my first love, which of course is comedy and storytelling. And 4 years into that, everybody thinks I jumped right from the White House to Designated Survivor. I did not. There were 4 years in the middle there, doing a couple of movies and things. But when the Designated Survivor script came around, I was like, I don't think I should do this. People are going to get confused. They're going to think that I just went from working at the real White House to a fake one. And then my agent says, well, it's Kiefer Sutherland. I was like, wait, what? Kiefer Sutherland's in this? Yeah, I should probably do it. Read the script again and realized the analogy is actually not that you went from the Obama White House to the Kirkman White House. The analogy is, okay, let's say I was an airline mechanic, right? I was working on airplanes, on engines at an airport. And then I did a play in which I played a flight attendant, like off Broadway. That's the difference. So I'm like, wow, I really don't know what a press secretary's job is. Like, you should tell me whether I did a good job in that role. I don't know what that's like. This was, the show started towards the tail end of the Obama administration, so I still had friends working in the building. And I asked Josh Earnest, who was the press secretary at the time, I was like, can I just shadow you for a day? And he was like, yeah, man, because we've worked what, 2,000 feet away from each other for years, and I just don't know what your life is like. So you tell me whether Seth was a good interpretation, because the public engagement office was very different than Seth's world in Designated Survivor.
You did an amazing job, actually.
Thank you. Okay.
You definitely reminded me of the Obama administration.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It was definitely very, put together, and you were, so loyal, right, to him.
Well, but did you watch the Netflix episodes?
Yes.
Okay, because the jump, I felt like the jump from going from the 2 seasons on ABC to Netflix was we went from being buttoned up to very much potty-mouthed people, which is also fairly authentic, I think.
They're definitely not angels in the White House. Right. Right. Okay, so let's talk about Bernie.
Yeah.
Yes, Bernie. So you probably know or heard that we recently released our immigration plan on the campaign. I am actually one of the DACA recipients that took part in writing it.
Oh, amazing.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So it was a long time coming. It was a labor of love. It was something that meant a lot to all of us who got together on the campaign to write it. So what I wanted to ask you is what you think a priority for the next Democratic president should be on immigration, right?
Yeah, well, there's a lot. There are a lot of priorities. I mean, I remember I haven't had a chance to read it yet, and I was excited to because one of the things that I very
fondly...
It's very
long, by the way.
Right, no, it's going to take me a while to get through it. I mean, I'm going to look to your videos with the explainer things on what's in it. But the DACA piece and the piece about our friends who are undocumented and who are living under a constant threat, day to day even, although now I guess we have to wait till, April or June for the Supreme Court verdict. But so I was at the White House when we were working on two things, the DREAM Act and Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal. And I wasn't working specifically on immigration, and I wasn't working on military or LGBT issues, but I was the president's point person for youth outreach. So both of those things touched my desk in a little more than peripheral way. And I remember it was a Saturday when the votes were happening on both of those. Thankfully, Don't Ask, Don't Tell got repealed. But the DREAM Act failed by 5 Democratic votes.
I remember.
And I feel like Democrats are still nervous in talking about the fact that it was 5 Democrats who screwed it up. And afterwards, we were obviously devastated. President Obama had a positive outlook in saying, look, 5 votes down is actually closer than this type of legislation has ever come. And so if you look at it historically, anytime legislation like that has come up, this is now the closest, which means the next person who is hopefully more progressive than Obama, these are now my views, right? that person can build on what the previous Democratic administration had done. And so when I have an eye on all these plans and quick fixes that were obviously imperfect that hopefully hold up in court, no Band-Aid fix is ultimately like a full comprehensive immigration reform, which is still what we need. And I get frustrated because as the guy who was on outreach, I was like, those 5 people, by the way, none of them I think are still in the Senate, but those 5.
Not surprised.
Not that they were. I don't know who replaced, by the way. I didn't come prepared to remember exactly who the 5 were, so I can't say for sure if there's somebody better in their places now or not. But it is important to remember that, and especially when we're in a presidential election and somebody who's incredible, like Bernie on a lot of these issues, that the down-ticket candidates are really going to impact what actually gets passed and doesn't get passed.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that's Bernie's mission, right, he says, not me, us. It's a movement, right? I can't, just become president and fix everyone's problems. It's going to take all of us coming together to pressure the Steve Kings of the world, right? And the Mitch McConnells who are not letting us pass legislation to help these people.
Or even the Chuck Schumers of the world, by the way, who oftentimes need a steady reminder that our communities exist.
I actually got arrested in his office.
Did you? There you go.
That was a fun time. Fun time. So speaking of mobilizing people, what do you think is going to be the best and broadest way for us to talk about immigration to help those who maybe aren't on our side yet that we need, right?
I think it depends on who you talk to, right? Like, I remember for so many people, there are conversations, like you look at conversations on just even something as simple as somebody's immigration status. And oftentimes people just have not considered that if you're the victim of violence and you're not documented and you don't live in a sanctuary city, that you can't come forward and report your crime to the police, which means that there's a criminal out there who's going to keep doing this to people. And it's a public safety issue, or the public health implications of something like that if you can't seek medical treatment or services. And I'm not really interested in the semantics of somebody who just goes, well, they don't deserve to be here anyway. Okay, that's fine. I totally hear what you believe, but the practicality is our folks are here. And when they are victims of crimes, what's your solution? And they have no solution, right? So I think having that tough conversation of like, I'm all ears about your semantics, but I'm not interested in entertaining them because I'm interested in hearing the practical solutions to things.
Yeah. I've had plenty of those conversations.
Yeah. I was going to say, what do you think? I shouldn't be talking to you about my feelings. I should be asking you what the solutions are. You're working on them.
Well, I definitely think that Bernie's plan is the most progressive, especially since it was written by people who will legitimately be impacted by the policies in that plan, right? And a lot of it is going to have to be done by executive action. I think that, the urgency is that we can no longer wait, right, until Congress makes up their mind anymore. They've been promising us immigration reform for so long, right? And now it just seems like a false promise when that's all we hear. So I think that, putting a moratorium on deportations until we can figure out, right, and audit these institutions that we don't know what it is that they're doing, right, and expanding the DACA program to include the people who aged out of it, right? A lot of those conversations are about improving, right, where we are taking things back, so like the Muslim ban, right, and so many executive actions that Trump made, but also going further than that and talking about the humanity of people, right? And I think that's why when I was watching the clips of Sunnyside, that is the human side of it, right? It's not just about not being deported, it's about economics. It's about, having health care. It's about finding education. So I think that's how immigration should be, seen as. It's a humanitarian issue, not a criminal
Definitely.
one, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's hurt us more than it's helped us to criminalize people,
Oh, for
right?
sure, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you count who it helps, a very wealthy few who who run,
Who own stocks,
who own stocks,
prisons,
and many of the things that Bernie's against. But that's what it's going to take, right? So you were talking about how your latest episode of Sunnyside is going to be about DACA. And, it's such a historic time, I would say, and scary time for a lot of people, considering that the Supreme Court just listened to oral arguments. So I wanted to know a little bit about what that was like to put all that together. For me, it would be a very emotional thing. But for you, what was that like?
It was very emotional for us for a number of reasons. It's actually, even in the sequence of how the episodes were shot, the doc episode that's out now, actually, I realized it's after 3 p.m. here, so it's out. So you can watch it on Hulu, NBC.com, Roku, YouTube TV. The free one's at NBC.com for folks who don't have Hulu. But the reason I'm doing the plug so hard is that I had never seen, and this is why I'm so proud that we accomplished it, and I did not write the episode, but I'd never seen characters talking about these types of issues in a comedy, and we wanted to make these conversations accessible. All of our characters are immigrants, and they are all deeply flawed as humans, as we all are. And we thought that was a really important thing to talk about, too, where we all have hopes and dreams and aspirations and things we screw up and things that make us angry, just like everyone else. And this notion that conversations about people of color or immigrants are bifurcated into either good or bad is so dehumanizing. John Cho, who plays Harold in the Harold and Kumar movies, I remember he used to talk about, like, the idea that any executive is proud that their show features a good Asian cop. Like, why? That's just as dehumanizing as making a Long Duck Dong stereotype. Like, that's humans are fleshed out, and they have just as many flaws and aspirations. And so all of that, those are all things we wanted to put into the episode. And so the runner with the Brady character, who comes out to his fraternity brothers as a DACA recipient, was done in a way where, the character himself is struggling with his own identity, where he viewed himself as this American-born kid who's in this presumably, very bro-y fraternity. And he has to come to terms with himself. He talks about being embarrassed about being an immigrant to his other immigrant friends, who obviously, there's a scene, Samba Shoot plays a character named Hakeem, who's an Ethiopian doctor turned cab driver while he's awaiting on, getting his relicensing. He's a newer immigrant. My character was born and raised in New York, and then the Brady character is a DACA recipient from Moldova. And the three of those characters have a conversation, and they're each at different points in how they view themselves as Americans and what they're embarrassed about in terms of their parents' identity or their ethnic identity or all of that. But it's done in such a dumb, funny way. It starts with the Brady character bringing a hammer to a bar and trying to convince Samba, who plays the doctor, to smash him in the face, because if he's smashed in the face, then his fraternity brothers have an excuse for why he can't travel with them to Cabo for some spring break trip, when in reality the reason he can't go to Cabo is because he's a DACA recipient and he doesn't know if he can get back in if he leaves the country. So something as dumb as, like, getting your face smashed with a hammer, which is where the comedy comes from, and then within that are the very real conversations that people sometimes have. So we're really proud of this episode. We've gotten a bunch of calls from people that we didn't expect. We have a panel in D.C. tonight with the Council on Foreign Relations, which is a very old school think tank. They wanted to have a panel on immigration and DACA by screening the episode. So I'm just really glad that folks are talking about it, obviously selfishly because we love the show and we want people to watch it, but we're really proud that it's the most diverse show in the history of TV that look, if you've got friends on your college campus or your neighbors who don't understand what it is, I love that our show is an opportunity for people to sit down and binge 3 episodes together and then have a conversation, like, over a beer or something. That's what I love about when comedy can do that. Those are the kinds of comedies I sort of gravitated towards as a kid.
I love that you guys chose to highlight that specific instance because I actually went through that.
Yeah.
I lived in a very small conservative town in Arizona, of all places. And, I had to lie a lot about who I was and what my family's situation was, which brings me to my next question of what have you learned about the immigration system from putting Sunnyside together?
Oh my gosh. Well, a lot, obviously, but it's also, I think our biggest takeaway, look, I keep repeating this because it's so true. We're an aspirational patriotic comedy, which means that our writers have to deal with things that I, as an actor, don't have to deal with. So I co-wrote the pilot, but once we were in production, schedules are such that I'm producing and I'm acting, but I'm not in the writer's room. So if you ask actors, our view of these scripts is so beautiful and inclusive, and we're so proud that we're telling stories that haven't been told on TV for our communities. And, by the way, for communities that don't look like ours. Like, if you're the standard Seinfeld audience from the 90s, I still think you're going to like Sunnyside. I really do, because we designed it that way. But if you want edgy TV that you haven't seen before, you'll definitely like it as well. So for us, it was more of like the rah-rah patriotism of, yes, we're defining what we've always known to be American, which are our communities, too. But then you ask the writers, and they have to be really mindful of the constant, almost day-to-day changes coming out of this administration about immigration. And they need to track them because our characters are going through real immigration processes. And so they have to figure out, okay, did something just happen that's going to change the episode that we're writing now that's going to air in 2 months? And by the time that airs, are things going to be different? Like, obviously, we're fiction, right? We're a fictional show. But we live with the understanding that reality exists. And so on my end, it's been an incredibly warm experience that is only a reminder, not that I needed one, of how amazing it is when all of our communities can come together for something. On the writer's side, I know it's also been very tricky because they have to constantly kind of be mindful of the realities, because we never want to... I have to point this out. We're never a response to the current administration. We would I would never give that guy that much credit because we're so much better than that. But we also want to be mindful of it so that we can continue to empower our voices. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
Did I say that in the right way?
No, that definitely does, and it reminds me a little bit about something Bernie said after the debate last night where, we've been talking about impeachment so much, right? But what we must not do is let him consume us.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Let him consume us, that we forget about the fight that is the long-term fight, which is for everyone to have healthcare as a human right, and to be able to have affordable housing, and to have access to education regardless of where they're from or how much money they make. And that if we let him consume that conversation, he wins again. Right? And that's so important, what you just said. And as someone who worked at the White House under the Obama administration, do you have any advice?
Oh my gosh. Well, look,
once we get there, do you have any advice for us?
What I love about the current primary campaign, right? Look, so I haven't formally chosen a candidate yet. Obviously, I am a fan of Bernie and a select handful of others that I can count on half of my hand. But the reason is that, like you said, they have the more progressive policies. And the one thing that I remember from the Obama campaign, not even the administration, was the President Obama used to say, you have to aim very high and then remember that the reality of a democracy is you don't always get everything that you want. But if you're not trying for it, then you're never going to get any of it. So I listen to moderate Democrats talk about reality, or their version of reality. Well, this isn't realistic, that's not realistic. You know what's not realistic? Expecting to get anything done when you're promising nothing but the status quo.
Exactly.
It's insane. So I'm not, that's no advice. I mean, Bernie and a handful of other candidates are already doing that, where you're like, they're aiming very high. And I was a Bernie surrogate in 2016, and I remember during that primary, Bernie's college affordability plan, free college, was a big deal, and I was really that was awesome. And to me, that was the next step beyond. In the Obama administration, we doubled the Pell Grant, and we tried with the American Opportunity Tax Credit and things that were good but should have been better. And in retrospect, it's always funny when I hear people go, well, why didn't you do that? I'm like, well, there was no magic wand. You have to remember you still have to govern when you get there, and you have to, not everything can be done with executive order. And of course, every president and administration makes mistakes, and you wish you had the hindsight to do things a little differently. I know in my case, when I started there, I assumed that other people, meaning other Democrats on the Hill or Republicans, were rational actors. And they're not. They're not necessarily looking out for the best interests of their constituents or their districts. All of which is to say, it goes back to the college affordability thing. So I thought that was awesome because I felt like it really built on some of the things that Obama was attempting to do and had succeeded in some cases and had still left some space to grow in others. And then on the primary campaign trail, I remember people being, well, college isn't free. Nothing's free. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Did you not hear the part about taxing rich people to pay for it? Because that's in there. You just got to read it. It's just I only have like 20 seconds, so I used free. Yeah, like I used the word free college because it's easier to say. But no, definitely you're taxing rich people who can afford it so that we can all get access to education. And then when Hillary won the nomination, I was, I ended up helping her out, her versus Trump, and I remember being so glad. It was a big lesson for me, I think, when she took Bernie's college affordability plan. Now, obviously, it didn't work out in the end, and you've got Trump in the White House. But I thought that was, in terms of why big ideas matter, that you have somebody with, she was farther to the right, obviously, on quite a bit, including education, and he was farther to the left. And once things got consolidated, the fact that she recognized that she needed to be farther to the left with a plan to make sure that young people are educated, I was really proud of that, and I thought that was amazing. And so I guess, I just think that constant reminder of like, a glass half full example is dumb. I'm not going to do that. It's been overused. But 50% is more than zero. So promising 1,000% of something and getting 500 is an enormous victory over the person who's promising 20% and delivering 2%.
I agree.
Yeah.
100%. So shoot for the stars.
Yeah, of course.
Shoot for the stars.
Big ideas matter.
Yeah.
And they are practical when they're done in the right way and when there are people in the House and the Senate that support it.
And we get a movement, right, behind us. That's exactly it. Well, I'll have to save my tips from Seth later, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
On how to be the press secretary for the White House. I'll ask him offline. But thank you so much for making the time to be here and tell us all about Sunnyside and, how important this show is in this moment in time. I know I'm going to go watch it tonight.
Well, thank you. And thanks for being so accessible and developing, thanks to Bernie also for developing the kind of campaign like this. I know a lot of us I am politically aware, but the last 6 months of my life I've been consumed by my job, and I know a lot of people who have 3, 4, 5 jobs and still make the time to volunteer or do things for their candidate are it's pretty amazing. So I think things like this that give people an opportunity to listen to a podcast like this when you're on your way to work or whatever, I know it helps folks sort through a lot of the noise. So not that we were like, look, we're talking about a TV show today, but but generally, it's important to have that space, and so thank you guys for doing that. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Neil Patrick Harris stole my car tonight, and PH wouldn't do that. All right, give me some ID.
Excuse me, how can you give him a ticket for jaywalking? It's 2:30 in the morning, and there's not a car around here. It's like he was causing traffic.
Kumar, shut up. That's not the kind of tone you want to use in a cop that could bust your ass.
Bust my ass?
Yeah, Kumar. Bust your ass. What kind of name is that anyhow, huh? Kumar.
I know you guys just did a video and recorded, but can you go around and just say your names into the mic?
Okay, hi, I'm Pooja Hi, I'm Pooja Patel. I'm creative director of US Youth Climate Strike.
Hi, I'm Isra Hersey, and I'm Partnerships Director for U.S. Youth Climate Strike.
Hi, I'm Philiquan Charlemagne. I'm the Executive Director of U.S. Youth Climate Strike.
I'm Dalen Prochaska, Political Director of U.S. Youth Climate Strike.
Okay, and so on average, how old are you guys?
17. Yeah, on average,
and I'm 16.
Oh. She's the youngest one.
This is out of control. So it's not often that you're sitting cross-legged on the floor with a bunch of people who are describing themselves as directors of this, that, and the other, who are only 16 or 17 years old. You guys are incredible. So what I should do is pick your brains about climate change and all these important things, but you just finished giving that interview. So I want to know is what you think Bernie should do social media-wise to really connect with your generation.
TikTok!
TikTok!
Get on TikTok.
Okay, so what should he do on TikTok?
I think, it can be it could be an accumulation of things. I want to see, dance videos. I want to see comedy.
Literally.
I want to see him do the trends where he's like, talking. Just everything, like anything TikTok is, I want to see Bernie doing.
You know that video of like ALC be like hi to Bernie and then Bernie's like doing that pose?
Yeah.
Can you just recreate that? Because I have a screen grab of that, but I want that on TikTok.
Okay, so I heard somebody earlier say ASMR. For the old heads in the audience who are listening, what is ASMR?
Oh my God.
Audio. Wait, I don't know the acronym, but it sounds like this, and you get tinglies.
Oh my God.
That's amazing. So it's kind of like sensations that you can create with the mic either by whispering or like crackling or eating pickles close to it, right? That kind of like make you feel good for like reasons. Okay, I'm being told it stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. Okay, I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
No one knows the best thing ever. What the heck?
So what's funny is I did an interview in here a couple of weeks ago with the senator, and a lot of people responded to the podcast interview saying Bernie's doing ASMR, just like naturally talking at a normal volume into the mic. So I feel like we might not be able to get him to do it, but he might just do it and we can brand it, right?
Trick him, yeah.
You're being too loud.
Pretend like the mic is broken and just be like, you gotta talk quieter. And just make him do it, and then you'll hear it, and then you guys can just brand it as Bernie SMR and post it.
Get him really relaxed. Get him really relaxed, and just he's all like, be quieter, calm down. Now tell us about, the billionaire class. Come on.
Just casually put a jar of plastic pickles next to
Yeah,
it.
do you mind eating this in the mic? Just no questions asked.
Just slime, just keep fingers in there.
Oh my God.
I want to see Bernie with slime.
Okay, I'm gonna add it to the list. I can't make any promises. But here's the thing. Given that Bernie hasn't done any of that stuff, and there's some other candidates who have some dances, I won't name names, stuff like that, who aren't as popular with younger people, why do you think it is that despite not doing any of that stuff so far, he's so popular with the youths?
I think it's his hair, honestly. I think we really like. I think we like his hair.
There's a certain vibe that Bernie has that the other ones can't really capture. I saw there was that interview with Bernie where he Bernie interviewed another version of Bernie. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. No other candidate could have done that. So there's something about Bernie's vibe and the aura that he gives off that would make that so much more appealing than some of the other individuals.
Yeah, you guys agree?
No, totally.
For sure, yeah.
It's the authenticity.
In that room full of chairs with the pose again.
Yeah,
that's stuff like that.
Even when he was trying to be fake, he couldn't do it right. He couldn't fake being fake, right? Yeah. Where are you from?
Real.
Oh, you're in Iowa too. He couldn't even do that.
He's way too real, and that's what's it's appealing in a way.
It's like ooh.
Yes.
What is
Okay, you see the letters. It's UWU. It's a little cute face.
It looks like a face. So it's
a
meme.
cat almost. It's
I
like a cat.
have never felt so
never.
old. Wait, what?
It's almost don't use that.
Don't do it. Don't do it realistically. But if you were to do it ironically somehow,
then
it would be
you can
good.
do it. Yeah.
It's very confusing.
This is such chaotic energy right now. I'm tired.
Can we come back here and do a fully fledged podcast though?
100%.
Oh my gosh,
100%. Anytime. Can you come? Are you guys ready?
Yes.
I don't know if we're gonna have time. Honestly though. I want to be
Sunday?
guests, but we have to actually
Is
organize.
Sunday a possibility?
Wait, what times do you guys have?
Whenever I'm around all day.
Can we do Sunday? Is that a
We
possibility?
could do it. We could definitely do it.
Any day.
Sunday.
There's a lot of time in the
No,
day.
we could do Sunday.
That's when we.
So we can do Saturday night.
We can do it. We'll find time.
We'll find
time.
Yes.
To do this podcast.
Okay.
So it's
no doubt.
so important.
Well,
this
is the teaser to end all teasers, so I can't wait to see you guys and hang out again,
Yes.
and maybe talk about something a little bit substantive at some point.
This is all substantive.
no,
what are you talking about?
Bernie
TikTok
would
is
eat a
important.
pickle in front of a mic though. I'm thinking about it realistically, and the first time I tried a hot pickle it was a few 2 weeks ago. Me and Felly, he picked me up from my house. We went to Circle K. I got a hot pickle, and listen. it was transformative. That was my first time, and I want Bernie to have that same experience because, dude, it was amazing. Like,
wait, can we have hot pickles and eat them on the pod?
Yes, please.
No, I love
hot
it.
pickles.
I love it too.
Before I put hot pickles in front of Bernie, I feel like it's my obligation. It's my professional obligation to first eat a hot pickle myself,
That's a great
vet
idea.
the hot
Great idea,
pickles,
yeah.
and then tell him whether it's a good political move.
Yes.
That could
I'm
be
a single
that
issue
sounds like
voter.
the pitch for that sounds like
I'm
a
a
pitch
single
for an
issue
interview.
voter. Hot pickle is my only issue.
I need Tier's opinion on the hot pickle.
Okay.
U.S. pickles, right?
So tune in to an upcoming episode of Hear the Burn, where you will hear us eat, discuss, and vet hot pickles for Bernie.
This was filmed in front of a live.
I love it.
That's it for this week. Please remember to like, comment, or subscribe wherever you're watching, including right here on YouTube. As always, transcripts will be up soon. Thanks for watching.